Hey everybody, Dom here. Today I'd like to count down the magic spells in Team Fortress 2 and organize them into a tier list. Magic spells can easily be confused with Halloween spells. Halloween spells are consumable inventory items that give cosmetic effects to cosmetics and weapons. This video only pertains to magic spells. Magic spells are power-ups that are picked up by touching spellbooks, crystal balls, or flasks on certain Halloween maps. They can only be held and used by having certain action slot items equipped. They remain held between lives. There are 12 spells in total, 7 regular and 5 rare. There are also magic spells specific to bumper cars, but those are excluded from this list. This list is just for fun. The knowledge of which spell is better or worse isn't very helpful, as it's random which spell a player is given. There's no way to choose what spell a player gets, but if a useless one is held, and another one is nearby, it's possible to quickly waste the spell in order to pick up the new one, and possibly get something better. Generally, the rare spells are better than the regular ones. Rare spells can rarely be generated from regular green spellbooks, crystal balls, and flasks. Rare purple spellbooks, crystal balls, and flasks always generate rare spells. With all that information out of the way, here's the list. The first magic spell of Tier 5 is Blast Jump. The Blast Jump spell has 2 charges. When cast, it heals the user for 25 health and propels them upward into the air, high enough to take fall damage. Enemies near the casting area are lightly damaged and pushed back. The spell can be used in the air, and both charges can be chained together. The Blast Jump spell isn't useful very often. It can be used as a quick, risky escape, and grants classes with poor vertical mobility some vertical mobility. One use for the Blast Jump is as a way for engineers to more easily reach high, up, out-of-the-way locations in order to place buildings. In most situations, the Blast Jump spell is worse than the Teleport spell, as they serve similar purposes, but Teleport is quicker and allows the players to cover greater distances. The second magic spell of Tier 5 is Teleport. The Teleport spell has 2 charges. When cast, it heals the user for 30 health and fires an arcing, smoky, team-colored projectile. When the projectile hits a surface, the player is teleported to the point of impact. Hitting a high-up wall may cause the player to fall and take fall damage. Enemies can block the projectile. If this happens, they take a small amount of damage, and the caster is teleported to the point of impact. It is not possible to teleport into enemy spawn rooms, as invisible barriers block the projectile. The Teleport spell isn't often useful. Since it's a delay between firing and when the projectile lands, it can be used in the middle of combat to vanish from enemies. The downside is, since it's not instant, it doesn't work very well to escape danger. Like the Blast Jump spell, Teleport is useful for engineers to reach high up, out of reach areas to place buildings. Low mobility classes benefit more from the mobility this spell provides. Enemies blocking the projectile is a large downside. The first spell of Tier 4 is Pumpkin Merve. The Pumpkin Merve spell has 1 charge. When cast, an arcing bomb is thrown. When it collides with a surface or an enemy, it splits into a ring of 6 pumpkin bombs with team-colored bindings and falls to the ground. The pumpkin bombs only last roughly 40 seconds, then they harmlessly vanish. If the caster or a teammate damages a pumpkin bomb, it will detonate the ring, damaging enemies and the player who triggered the detonation. If the pumpkin bombs are damaged by enemies, they will vanish harmlessly. The Pumpkin Merve spell deals a lot of damage and can kill a lot of enemies. The main problem with it is it's cumbersome to use. With the time it takes a player to select a good target and cast a spell, enemies have already moved to safety. Using the spell as a trap is also not very good. The best trap locations are places enemies must travel, like near or on objectives, near a spawn's exit, or in tight hallways. The spell is way more useful for classes with a dependable way to detonate the pumpkin bombs. It's difficult to detonate them, so having a weapon like a shotgun that can reliably do so is powerful. The second magic spell of Tier 4 is Bolo Bats. The Bolo Bat spell has 2 charges. When cast, an arcing, swirling, team-colored bat-filled projectile is fired. When it collides with something, all nearby enemies are damaged and propelled upward. Enemies hit are surrounded by an effect and take bleed damage over time. The Bolo Bat spell is pretty decent and often useful. It's forgiving to use. The effect radius is large, so it's likely to hit enemies. The shortcomings of this spell are that it doesn't do a lot of damage, and its bonus effects are useless. The upward pushing effect and bleed damage is flavorful and fun, but doesn't accomplish much. Another downside is the projectile arcs, so it can't travel very far. The third magic spell of Tier 4 is Fireball. The Fireball spell has 2 charges. When cast, a team-colored fireball projectile is fired. The projectile is not affected by gravity, it travels in a straight line. When it collides with something, all nearby enemies are damaged and set on fire. They take afterburn damage. The Fireball spell is quite good. It's very comparable to the Bolo Bat spell, but generally it's a bit better. The main difference is Fireball travels in a straight line, so it can be aimed like a rocket, and it's easier to use. The one downside the Fireball spell has is that it's less useful versus Pyros, as Pyros are immune to afterburn. Interestingly, the spell can be used while underwater and on enemies underwater. They take damage, but not afterburn damage. The fourth magic spell of Tier 4 is Stealth. The Stealth spell has one charge. When cast, it heals the user for 40 health and makes them invisible for 8 seconds. The invisibility works different than a Spy's Watch. The caster can attack while invisible, but doing so removes the invisibility. Taking damage and colliding with enemies does not reveal the outline of the user. The Stealth spell is incredible in the right situations. It's a fairly reliable way to escape danger. The invisibility coupled with the healing makes the spell great for this task. The spell is also excellent when used in an offensive way. It can be used to ambush enemies. Fun side note, with this spell, spies can finally backstab while cloaked. The first magic spell of Tier 3 is Uber Heal. The Uber Heal spell has one charge. When cast, it instantly heals the user for 52 health, gives them Uber invulnerability for 1 second, and pushes back nearby enemies. The user is then rapidly healed over 3 seconds. The 3-second healing can overheal users if their health reaches maximum. This overheal extends over the normal maximum and can reach up to twice the user's base health. The health granted from overhealing is larger than the health granted from healing. Roughly 230 overheal is gained at full health. When cast, all the effects of the spell excluding the knockback apply to nearby teammates. The Uber Heal spell is extremely powerful in clutch situations. The healing this spell provides is likely the strongest healing in the entire game. If a team can organize enough to group together for a few seconds, they can gain an incredible amount of health and overheal. The spell has great versatility. It can be used in a fight to escape death, or in preparation of a fight for a large advantage. The second magic spell of Tier 3 is Bolo Lightning. The Bolo Lightning spell has one charge. This spell is considered a rare spell. When cast, a huge team-colored ball with electrical crackles is fired. This projectile moves slowly and bounces off surfaces. Enemy players that touch the projectile get caught in it. They are forced to travel with the projectile and take damage repeatedly. The projectile vanishes after 5 seconds, at which point enemies that are caught in it are free to move again. The Bolo Lightning spell is outstanding at disorienting. If an enemy gets caught, they'll likely miss all their shots as they travel along the projectile's trajectory. The spell is also great at killing enemies. It does a lot of damage over time. Most classes die from full health if they get caught in it right away. One downside is, since the projectile travels slowly, it needs to be fired close to enemies to ensure they get caught. Despite this, usually enemies are easy to hit as the projectile is massive. The main glaring downside of the spell is that enemies rarely get stuck in it for its full duration. Most of the time they escape the projectile, only taking a small amount of damage in total. The first magic spell of Tier 2 is Summon Skeletons. The Summon Skeletons spell has one charge. This spell is considered a rare spell. When cast, an arcing skull is thrown. When it collides with a surface or an enemy, it splits into 3 team-colored skulls and falls to the ground. From the location the skulls land, 3 team-colored skeletons rise from the ground. They then proceed to run around attacking enemies. They last roughly 30 seconds, but can be killed by enemies before then. The Summon Skeleton spell excels at being easy to use. The spell doesn't require aim or timing. It can simply be cast and forgotten about. The skeletons are more powerful than they seem. They work well at finishing off wounded enemies, or enemies who have their attention occupied by something else. One use for the spell is around map objectives, to stall and cover the objective. The second spell of Tier 2 is Summon Monocular. The Summon Monocular spell has one charge. This spell is considered a rare spell. When cast, an arcing skull is thrown. When it collides with a surface or an enemy, a team-colored transparent floating eyeball is summoned above the point of impact. The eye shoots rocket-like projectiles at enemies in volleys of 3. If no enemies are within view, it idles. It lasts roughly 14 seconds, then it vanishes. The Summon Monocular spell is useful to deny enemies map objectives. It acts as a sentry and can cover a pretty big area for its duration. Ideally, it's placed in an area that's not too wide open but also not too cramped. If it's placed in a large area and targets far away enemies, they have a better chance of dodging. If it's placed in a small area, it has trouble shooting and may hit walls. The AI isn't great. It shoots at enemy locations but doesn't compensate for their movement. The spell is very easy to use. Like Summon Skeletons, the user can just cast a spell and forget about it. It's difficult to use this spell poorly and make it go completely to waste. The first magic spell of Tier 1 is Meteor Storm. The Meteor Storm spell has one charge. This spell is considered a rare spell. When cast, an arcing fireball is thrown. When it collides with a surface or an enemy, the impact location is bombarded with a team-colored shower of fireballs. The fireballs deal a lot of damage and ignite players, causing them to take afterburn damage. The bombardment lasts roughly 5 seconds. The Meteor Shower spell is very good at quickly killing enemies and denying access to an area. The damage starts very quickly after the fireball impacts, so enemies aren't likely to escape it. The area of effect is large enough to cover map objectives, making the spell pretty good at discouraging and killing enemies attempting objectives. In a panic situation, casting the spell at the floor while surrounded usually kills all assailants. The second magic spell of Tier 1, and the final spell, is Minify. The Minify spell has one charge. This spell is considered a rare spell. When cast, it heals a user for 100 health, puts them into third person, shrinks their player model, expands their head, increases their class's voice pitch, increases their movement speed, increases their weapon fire rate, increases their weapon reload rate, increases the amount of knockback they take, and grants them unlimited air jumps. After 20 seconds, the spell wears off and the user is returned to normal. If the spell effect wears off while the user is too close to level geometry, they die. This is to make sure the user doesn't get stuck if they expand to normal in a location they wouldn't fit. The Minify spell is underestimated and often poorly used. Most users don't realize the spell grants unlimited air jumps. The unlimited air jumps effectively give the user the power of flight. The ability to move fast and fly around enemies while simultaneously being small makes the user extremely difficult to hit. The increased attack speed and reload allows the user to rain down damage on enemies while remaining reasonably safe. The spell's effectiveness depends on the class. As an example, a soldier raining down rockets on enemies will be more effective than a medic raining down needles. Lastly, the 100 health and healing the spell provides is incredibly useful in clutch situations. And that was my tier list for Team Fortress 2 magic spells. Here's a summary on screen. Generally, I didn't value the mobility ones highly as they're not often useful. I think people underestimate the healing from Uber Heal and the power of stealth. Finally, I value the ease of use of spells, so spells that are cast and forget or difficult to misuse are higher on the list. Thanks for watching. Au revoir.